Well, good morning from Adswood. It's a while since we've done a video about Clematis due to all sorts of reasons that faced most of you last year during lockdown, as well as my family. But here we are again, outside. It's a beautiful day. It's early June, so some of the large flowering hybrids are just coming to their best, as you can see behind me. And what I want to do today and on future days is to show you that you can have Clematis in flower for most of the year in your garden. By selecting Clematis from different groups, you can produce colour and extend the flowering palette in your garden very easily. I've done two leaflets to accompany this. One is entitled Clematis for year-round colour in your garden, and it includes some suggestions about the Clematis that you can think of purchasing for the spring, for the summer, for the autumn and for the winter. And accompanying this is a chart which both can be downloaded from my website, but this takes you through the characteristics of each of these Clematis and each of these groups because they have different needs. You probably have been told that you plant Clematis deeply, 6 inches or more deeply. Well, that's not true with all Clematis. In fact, you'll kill some if you do that. All Clematis like their feet in the shade and their head in the sun. Well, that's not actually true of all Clematis either. And some Clematis don't need pruning. And I'll go through all those so that by the time this series of videos have finished, if you watch them, you will have a very good grasp of how to be successful with a whole range of Clematis, and hopefully it'll answer a lot of the questions that you may have or allay some of the fears that you may have had that have stopped you from buying Clematis. So first of all, Clematis grow mainly in the Northern Hemisphere. There are about 300 different species growing in the wild. Now, a species is a Clematis that hasn't been cross-pollinated from another Clematis. So these are the original ones from which material is taken to bring about the modern Clematis that we have today. They grow in all sorts of situations, some halfway up mountains, some by streams, some like cold conditions, some tolerate Mediterranean conditions. So you'll see just from this small example that they probably have slightly different growing needs, but don't let that put you off. I'll go through all of these. Botanists have classified these 300 Clematis into groups of similarities, and these groups have subgroups, and some of the subgroups have subgroups. It's quite complex, and I'm not going to take you through all those, but I am going to use a term family group to talk about the main groupings that our varieties come from. And varieties are the ones that you will see online and in garden centres, and these are crosses between more than one Clematis. Sometimes Clematis from different groups, sometimes Clematis from the same group. But these provide us with the tapestry of colour that we can use throughout the year. So let's start with the large flowered hybrids. These are divided into two groups for pruning purposes: early large flowering hybrids and late large flowering hybrids. Many people now treat them both the same. You can prune them quite hard and they'll flower a bit later, or you can treat the early ones with a light prune in the spring, just basically tidying them up, taking off any dead bits or brown bits from after the winter, and they will flower a bit earlier. I've got two here. One is an early. This is both are young plants. This is Warsaw Nike, and this other one is Seamoo. I always put my own labels on, and I had a code. LLF is just telling me it's a large flowered hybrid, and this one has ELF, early flowering hybrid. It's so that I don't forget which are which. If you want to plant one of these in the garden or in a larger pot, the large flowered hybrids should be planted more deeply than they are in the pot. And this is the reason. You may have heard people saying you plant them 6 inches deeply or 4 inches deeply. It's not so much the depth, it's the nodes that you get under the soil. What's a node? Well, this is a node. Clematis produce their leaves either side of the stem, and in the crooks between the leaf stalks are dormant buds. And if you cut the main stem off, these dormant buds will shoot. Now, I can show you on this one that stem has been cut and the dormant buds are starting to shoot either side. And this will create 2 more branches. And it's these that you want below ground level in case the plant gets damaged, attacked by one of the many aphids that we have in our gardens, slugs and snails. They get hit with footballs or careless hoeing. All sorts of things can break the stems and spoil these. So being able to have some in reserve under the ground is a very useful thing to do. Now, because it's not so much the depth, it's the nodes, and clematis vary in terms of how closely the leaves are to each other, but in this one they're quite far apart. If I take that tie off, you'll be able to see that there is a junction there between the leaves and the next one is right up here. So you would make a decision whether you planted it to that sort of depth to make sure that those are below the soil level, or whether in fact you planted it even deeper to make sure you had 4 sets of these nodes below soil level. And if the top of the plant then gets damaged, the plant then will throw up from below the ground more stems so that you don't lose your plant. As I've said elsewhere in these videos, not all clematis get treated like that, and some, if you do, will die. But the hybrids, the large flowered hybrids, the earlies and the lates are the ones that you treat like this. So let's have a look at some of the large flowered hybrids that are currently in flower in the garden. Some are in pots, but some are planted in the borders. This one is clotted cream. Isn't it lovely? So you've now had a look at some of the large flowered hybrids in the garden, beginning of June, so most of them are the early ones at the moment. And you will have noticed that some are quite large, some are good for patio pots, and like this bijou, it could also be grown in a hanging basket. Isn't that wonderful? So many flowers still to come. So the large flowered hybrids are very much worth their money, but some people find them tricky to grow, and some of them can be difficult to grow. Damage occurs to them, wind damage, and some do get the clematis stem wilt. I don't think it's as common as many people think it is, because when some of my plants fail, I investigate and often come up with other reasons. For example, if the weather's been warm and you haven't been watering enough, the plant may be stressed and unable to produce flowers and may wither on more than one stem. It could be that the stems have been damaged, as I said earlier. Have a look at this. This is, as everybody can see, it's a clematis stem, or a mock-up of a clematis stem. And the stems consist of 2 sets of cells. One of them takes the water and nutrient up from the roots to where the plant needs them for flowering and to the leaves. The other set takes the sugars produced by the plant back down to the roots. It's a very symbiotic relationship. Now, for those of you that have grandchildren, you will know that it's great fun to break one of these in half or kink it, because it's much harder to suck up the lemonade or whatever they're sucking up. And that's the same with the plant. If the stem gets damaged, the plant is having to work much harder to get liquid through that kink or sugars down through that kink, and is under stress. So if the plant is not in peak condition, it will start to show signs of struggle. And that's what happens to many of the hybrids. Of course, some do get wilt, and I'll deal with that in another video. But as I said, I don't think it's as common as many people think. So I'll leave those there. The sort of plants you will get, the varieties of plants that you will get from your garden centre or online are many. There are a huge number of these hybrids. And in the leaflet that you can download from the website, I've listed some of the common varieties that you can buy in the UK. Ones like Nellie Moser, Niobe, Gladys Pickard, Scartho Gem, Mrs Chumley, and some of the later ones, Volucci, Jackmanii, Prince Charles. There are literally hundreds of these that you can buy. Many are quite expensive, so if you're not comfortable about growing these hybrids and are a bit suspicious of how tricky they can be, then you may be put off. My experience, however, is that when growing them in a pot with good compost, I get better results than some of them that I've put in the soil that don't appear to like my soil and die off quite quickly. Anyway, that's the large flowered hybrids. Just a reminder about planting depth. You can see from there, that chart, that the hybrids are the ones that you plant more deeply to get nodes under the soil, as I explained earlier. And most of the other Clematis you plant at soil level. But I'll deal with these in future videos. Hope you've enjoyed this one. Have a good summer. Bye.